You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
You're tuned in to Fantha Tracks Radio's The Fantha From Down Under.
This is the Fantha From Down Under.
G'day, mate, how you going?
Star Wars news in a single file.
Coming to you live from Quinlan's Cantina in the Gold Coast of Australia. This is your slice of Australian Star Wars news.
Hosted by the Malt himself, Adam O'Brien.
Alrighty, mate, let's get into it.
Welcome to the Fantha From Down Under, brought to you by Fantha Tracks Radio. All your Star Wars news in a single file. I'm your host, Adam O'Brien. And now it's time for the news here on the Fantha From Down Under. Alright, for all of you out there that are also obviously subscribed to Disney Plus, you have the great Clone Wars final season out there, and I personally haven't had a chance to see this yet, folks, so again, I'm being very cautious of spoilers, but we'll let you know that at fanthatracks.com you got full reviews of the episodes, up to date, all the way through from all of our great supporting staff there. Of course, we have from Mark Newbold, Matt Booker, and the entire team, all the way down with their thoughts on, of course, where this is going. And from what I hear, it is not only the great season that ties everything together, but also really gives a final part to some of the great characters that we've obviously grown accustomed to loving. And, of course, that's all the great characters from that time period, not just in the Clone Wars itself, but I hear a few characters, much beloved in some of the films, are starting to make appearances there as well to tie things together. So it's the greatest period in Star Wars. I always loved Episode 3 through to Episode 4, the dark times when the Empire made things a lot more difficult than people were ready for. And obviously, with the rise of Darth Vader and all of the state of the Empire sort of driving and getting its foothold in all areas of the galaxy, it's prime for great storytelling. And of course, that's where the Clone Wars season obviously leads into is Episode 3 and then on to where it needs to. It's that time period. Not that I know too much of it because I haven't watched it yet. I want to really sit down and watch it, on a really big TV. That's one thing I'm sort of waiting for. I'm going to get the biggest I can find, or even a projector. One of those massive 4K projectors, who knows? But, in this time sort of period where we, sort of in lockdown still, even though that a lot of us in the States here in Australia are starting to ease a lot of the lockdown restrictions, we're going to be soon able to go to the cinemas again in the coming months, hopefully around about by July. So who knows? I mean, there's been some really great films that have had a chance to be shown, particularly animated series as well, being shown in local cinemas here in Queensland. I'm thinking of more along the lines of the Warner Brothers series of ones, the DC animated and stuff like that, because they really did get a chance to the show to local cinemas. And I mean, it's great to finally see it in such a massive format, and the sound being so amazing too with Dolby Atmos. So put it out there too. Obviously, it's on the streaming platform, but hey, Lucasfilm, I would love to see the epic conclusion to the Clone Wars on the big screen. Why not? We got the intro to this in that film, that massive, huge, great film that started all this back in 2008, and we are so thankful for it. We got so much enjoyment out of it too, so can't wait to check it out. Lots of news also about, obviously, Season 2 of The Mandalorian. There's details out there you can find on a lot of the sites. I'm not going to go into that. But what I'm really looking forward to is, them obviously exploring some of the mythology, the mystery about not only the Mandalorians, but a lot of the characters that we've seen, obviously, that in the bounty hunter profession, in the mercenary sort of area. It's something that is more spent time in the books, and we definitely got a sense of it in the first season, and obviously that sort of, I suppose, outlaw theme from Westerns really carrying through here. But I want to see more. I want to see a little bit more of the depth, but there's no mistaking it. The amazing artistry to bring this together and put on the screen is, obviously the great work of Jon Favreau, the team, obviously Dave Filoni, and all the other amazing people behind the scenes here have really pulled off what is one of the greatest bits of television you're ever going to see. And again, you can watch it at your own pace. That's the great thing about this streaming format. It really is a great way to catch up with that sort of thing. And it's only going to expand on too, with other franchises really taking foothold. You only got to look at science fiction. We have one of the most biggest events in years, and I think something's going to be truly amazing. I know I rattle on about it a lot, which is, of course, Dune, which is going to be coming out in December and has obviously an accompanying TV series called The Sisterhood of Dune, which is going to sort of bring out, obviously, the storyline of the schools of Dune. So the schools like obviously the sisters, the Bene Gesserit, which are pretty much one of the heaviest influences for the Jedi, along with obviously the Knights of the Round Table and the samurai and stuff like that. But the Bene Gesserit really were that sort of precursor to the Jedi when you look at, in the written science fiction form, along with some of Doc E. Smith's work with Lensman and stuff like that too. So we've got a lot to be thankful of for what Frank Herbert really started with that. Obviously, to the Swordmasters of Guinness, and of course the Spacing Guild, and of course the Medical Suit Doctors, and of course the Mentats. So there's a huge big thing that they're going to be bringing in a TV series format, and obviously subscription based. It's going to be huge for Legendary Pictures, and no doubt, obviously, everyone behind that too. So that's something to look forward to. And, I think that's one of the things that Lucasfilm is really looking at is where to obviously take what they currently have and expand that on. We've obviously got quite a few TV shows being talked about, which won't go into. Obviously, they're all, still to be really, I think, properly, brought to the fore by Lucasfilm themselves. And we got obviously the two that are already in production, which are Mandalorian and, of course, the Rogue One one, which is really interesting. It's Rogue One really as a movie is definitely my favorite of the new films. But what was great about that film in particular is that I don't think people really thought it had a chance of taking a foothold with fans, because it was such a sort of left of field idea, let's take the crawl of A New Hope and basically give it legs, make it move, turn it into a film. But it is such an interesting story, and they only had the one movie to get these, characters a chance to, basically give the sacrifice and the heroism that, say, a trilogy worth of characters would do. And I think it's done so well in such a short time. So hats off to the guys that created that. They've done, as a team, everybody involved in that has done such an amazing job. But, really the spy and sort of intelligence gathering of the rebellion, and in turn, obviously, the Empire as well, is going to be something that's really interesting to explore. Cassian Andor is a great character. Really, there's a sort of a dark side to intelligence, obviously, that sort of James Bond 007, pretty bleak, if you like, attitude to, the safety of not only themselves, but the safety, obviously, of the people they're really putting forward, which is obviously the rebellion. So we saw a touch of that, and obviously we're going to see a lot more of that, plus, obviously, the characters surrounding that. But it's great to hear that, we're seeing some of the cast come back over that period too, and I really want to see Bail Organa in there. I certainly want to see, obviously the Captain Antilles and people like that around that area that really was sort of support network of Alderaan, and we saw a lot of it in the radio dramas. So I really want to see them grow that, and a series is the perfect format for that too. So who knows where it's going, but again, every single franchise is trying to pop this out. I think the only Star franchise not doing it is Stargate. God, they had the longest running franchise for a while when it came to TV and film and stuff like that, and the telly movies. But what's great to see too, we have a watch basically happening for a lot of fans of Farscape, which in some ways to me is kind of like the companion piece to Star Wars that Henson worked on. Obviously, the Henson Company, obviously, through Frank and obviously through Jim, basically saying, look, you gotta give Frank a chance to create Yoda, the performance of Yoda and stuff like that too. So obviously, to me, Farscape was at the time the closest Star Wars was ever to coming to live action television, and I still love it today. And obviously, created out here in Australia, folks. That's right. I'm sure there was a few mullets involved. Who knows? But at the end of the day, it's great to see that there's a lot of interest now that it's got a massive Blu-ray box set out there, and we really would love to see another Farscape series down the line too. So, but without further ado, folks, we're going to look through the back catalogue today, and we're going to go right back to the start. First up is our chat with Callisto, dear friend of the podcast, and of course, huge Star Wars fan. And we're chatting about Rogue One's era, and of course, the new Cassian Andor show. But we start with chatting about one of our most beloved characters from Star Wars, and that is, of course, Jar Jar Binks.
Jar
But you're right. Jar Jar, I think, too, like, the poor guy is not a politician. He was put in that situation by, having to represent. And, of course, he's going to get conned. He got conned by Palpatine. Palpatine said, this would be really good for you. It's like a car dealer. He was saying, this car's really good for you.
He got Anakin, and Anakin is just, like, not dumb. He's just, like, he's human. And it was a human decision.
Yeah, 100%. And I think most people, if they're pushed into that, they'd probably, they would do it, and it's something just in the spur of the moment, it feels like it's the right thing to do. But if Padme was there, she would have just gone, no way, Palpatine.
Yeah, so please, people, if you listen to this, don't blame Jar Jar and blame Padme.
Yeah, and Ahmed's just, he's a wonderful artist. The work that he did on those, he always put a smile on my face when I saw the character. Or even when he turned up in the first season of Clone Wars as Bombad Jedi, that was so good.
What?
Yeah, he was great because he went to a place where they actually thought he was a Jedi because he put the hood over his head and he's like doing the moves. It was so good. It was brilliant. I loved it. But yeah, I think with the prequels, again, we had a new wave of fans there. They got to also then go back and look at the original trilogy too. So it's interesting. Each time we have a new wave, whether it's people coming on Rebels or now Resistance, which unfortunately I've never been able to see because we can't get it here. But
yeah, and I've been lazy. Like, I was so busy last year. I couldn't even catch it, so with Disney Plus, it's going to be like a good thing to catch on.
Yeah, like we actually get to see the series now like that too. Because I always see some of the voice actors putting up stuff here and there and say, "Oh, you got to watch this episode come out. It's really, really good." I'm like, I still can't see it. I want to see it. It's amazing. Yeah. But with all these, I think that's what's so good, and the fact that now we have 3 shows coming with Cassian Andor as well. We get one of my favorite droids in with him in that one too. So, Diego Luna.
Too.
I have to do it because Cassian Andor said I had to.
Hello there. You're listening to the Fantha From Down Under. Enjoy, lads.
So it's that's a great show to come in on, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting because when he said this sentence to Din, just I spent my entire life and sacrificed my life for this rebellion. I want to know what happened to him.
Yeah,
I want to know more. I despised him on this. You can't him for at the beginning of the movie because
like you say, it's hard to like him at the start because he's pretty cold. He shoots his friend and then he's pretty rough on the characters around him.
Yeah, definitely. He got cold because of his past and probably what happened to him. But I mean, around Jean, more and more he's get to know her. Just hey, she didn't want that, and she was the spark of the rebellion.
Yeah.
Again. Yeah.
So I think
rebellion is hope, and hope is rebellion. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. I hope we get to see a bit of Saw Gerrera.
Yes. Oh my God, he's crazy, but yes.
Yeah.
he's more extremist.
Yeah,
he's kind of an extremist. So it's gonna.
He is. He's very extreme.
It's gonna be like interesting. It's gonna be interesting to see like how he became so angry.
Yeah. So he must have gone through some hard times.
Yeah.
Definitely. Where he is, and he's kind of like a 007. Like he's kind of like a James Bond, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which is, and I think Diego can do that. Like he's quite a good actor. I've seen him in other stuff, and the fact that he can.
He is, and being like a Mexican actor in a huge like franchise. Usually, you see like just like a whitey American or a Brit, but it's a lot.
Oh yeah,
it's a lot. So it's going to be good.
I mean, that was one of my favourite casts was Rogue One because fairly all new talent, and I mean they had Donnie Yen, one of my favourite actors out there. Like he's just great, and the fact that they're all as strong as each other, but they all had their own sort of time in the movie as well, and it was a new way to look at the Force, like the whole I am one with the Force and the Force is with me.
He's one of the favorite character, like probably. He's my like Jin, of course, because she's a female and tough and everything. Jin Erso, but yeah, he's probably like my favorite character.
He's so good. That movie was a real shock to me how fun it was. Like it was, and spoiler warning, folks, nobody survives. Like that's the thing that
Yes, and yeah, because you saw the rebels like plotting and organized and you can see their strategy, and now you can see like inside. You're definitely like inside of the rebel base and of their part of the plan, and because you know what's gonna happen, and it's a dead end. That was great.
It was fantastic.
That was great.
And we got new worlds like Jedha and Scarif. I loved Scarif.
Yes, me too. It's beautiful, but it's like a massacre.
Oh yeah, it is. It really is.
Beautifully sad.
It is, because when they did the pan over the top with the starship, I'm kind of like, I'm just waiting for stormtroopers to break out surfboards. Like it was that cool.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
It's so like it's a paradise.
It really is, and to have like the heart of their plans and stuff to be this place, you can imagine Tarkin going down and go for a sunbathe and go for a bit of a swim in the beach, like it's crazy, like it's
yeah, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rogue One so far is one of my favorite movies ever.
It really is.
Like Star Wars, it's a really good one.
I'm Derek Arnold, and I get my news from Fantha Tracks.
Especially when Vader turns up and you got his castle, and I mean they didn't need to label that one because everyone knew straight away. Oh, we know where he's going.
Yeah, we know. And the end, this end with like Darth Vader. Now you can now you see he is the most villain in the entire galaxy, and he's fearless. He has no mercy. And he doesn't care, and just like this crazy dark way, and like he's going just like with the red lightsaber, and just like you're like, oh my god, this is crazy, this is great. It was like it's an incredible scene.
G'day, mate, how you going? You're listening to the Fantha From Down Under. All your Star Wars news in a single file from down here in Australia. Alright folks, you know this man very well if you're a listener of the Fandom Podcast Network. This gentleman is one of the unsung heroes of the Doctor Who fandom. Doctor Who? No, Doctor Who. That's right. And of course, Doctor Who, massive BBC franchise, of course, and a time-travelling doctor. This is what his show's about, Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast on the Fandom Podcast Network. And of course, he likes Star Wars too. That's why he's here on the Fantha From Down Under tonight. Is the one, the only, the man, the bones in Birmingham, the man with the plan. That is, of course, Tom Baker's best friend. And of course, the one, the only, Dan Hadley.
Okay.
Wait.
Oh, look at that. Listen to that beautiful audio there, folks. That's right. That is the Birmingham Quartet. No, it's not. It is, of course, the intro for the one, the only Dan Hadley. Buddy, how you doing?
Hello, I was just wondering what year is this? I've just stepped out of the blue box and I don't recognise anything.
The force is with you, I hear.
There's no UK bus stops. There's no national lottery signs anywhere. I've absolutely no idea where I am. Could I be down under?
You could be down under, and not only could you be there, you could also be on the Fantha From Down Under, which is your first time. I can't believe it's your first time on the show, mate. Welcome.
The Fantha From Down Under. This is my very, very favourite Star Wars podcast.
Well, thanking you very much for that, sir. It's also Sean Connery. Sean loves this show too. Sean says, thank you very much. Star Wars is such a great franchise, and I love it so much that James Bond is a lot better though. 007 rules.
Yeah, on the Emperor's Secret Service. I never thought of that one. Well, what am I doing here? Why have I popped out of the vortex here? Is this your doing, O'Brien?
It might be a bit. Look, honestly, I think the biggest thing is we're celebrating right now. A bit of a different time in Star Wars right now. The Skywalker saga has come to an end, and we must ask you, what are your thoughts of Star Wars right now? But the biggest thing is, what do you love about Star Wars? There you go. There's the first one.
Oh, see, when you want the question answered properly, ask a Time Lord. Okay, what are my thoughts on Star Wars right now, or just generally?
Right now, where you're at Star Wars, what are your thoughts?
Right now, Star Wars is in a precarious place, I feel, partly down to where it is with the fandom and partly down to the handling of the property by Disney. That's something from an outsider's point of view, but as somebody who's always loved Star Wars, on my channel, because I've got a YouTube channel too, I've just reviewed the latest Star Wars movie. I got round to it later than everybody else, and I did get a huge amount of pleasure out of it. But I also saw, sadly, a franchise that was kind of looking a little worse for wear, a little tired. So I think, but fortunately, of course, we just had the Mandalorian.
Yes. Which
everything that the Rise of Skywalker didn't do, the Mandalorian did do.
Well,
so that's the good news. That's the good news. I feel that somewhere that between them, they can actually start making. Well, they've started making good Star Wars again with the Mandalorian.
Yes.
I understand the Clone Wars. I understand that's doing really well. That this final one of the Clone Wars, that's great. I love what I've seen of the Clone Wars. So we're now getting good Star Wars. I think that it's not outside the realms of the fourth or fifth dimension.
Well, that's right. I mean,
to start making great Star Wars again.
That's right. I mean, we've had Star Wars Episode 9, the Mess of the Skywalker, which is, it's.
They just needed to get that film out of the way, didn't they? That's how it felt to me watching it. They realised that things hadn't gone according to plan. They were obliged to make that third film. They needed to round off that trilogy. Let's just get it made. Let's get it out of the way. Let's clear the decks and hopefully build a new creative vision for the future of Star Wars.
I think so too. Look, I think there's definitely some type of communication breakdown somewhere. Definitely happened in the sequel trilogy. We had obviously a strong start. Force Awakens, loved it. Absolutely loved that film. Obviously, here's the weird thing is, back in the old days, George spent 3 years between each movie, spread them out enough time that he had to, had an overarching idea of the plan, rough plan. It was never a full written down thing, but he at least had the footnotes of what would have, set each part, the beginning, middle, and end. Of course, the cause.
That's what he did. That's what he did. That was right, though, wasn't it? He had it in his head, the general idea, but he was open to wherever the creative process would take him over that 4 or 5 or 6 year period, and he had one ear on how it was being received by the audience, by the general audience, and as the fandom started to birth. So he knew he was instinctual, and it was also timely. He listened to the right people, and it was a really, really exciting time. I mean, I suppose having Spielberg close at hand, Francis Ford Coppola close at hand, but that I can't do George Lucas down. He was a visionary. He is one of the key entertainment figures of the 20th century, and I respect him very deeply.
Oh, same here. Look, at the end of the day, you say what you will. The prequel trilogy looks a hell of a lot better than a certain trilogy we just watched, and a lot, and that's been often bagged so badly. And so the biggest thing is here, they have really tried to get, I think, the entire sequel trilogy out as quick as they could. Now, is that maybe because they were obliged to when they bought the company? I think that's a lot part of it too, because I think they want to tell their own story. They want to tell their own story. I mean, and the thing is, you look at it, Rogue One is the strongest film they put out. It's an original story. It's one that obviously they wanted to, have a chance with these spin-offs to tell stories that probably haven't been even on the cards with George. These are things that they, Mandalorian's a perfect example as well. But I would say the biggest thing is there's been this, I feel it, in some ways the sequel trilogy may have been, I'm not going to say a hindrance to them, but it was something that was there, it was part of the deal, and go, oh, okay, we've got to put these films out. Let's just hire multiple people straight away and just get the creatives going on it. Obviously, they had...
Mate, it's what you were just saying about George Lucas. George Lucas had a structure that was malleable, but with the sequel trilogy, there was no structure at all.
Yeah, but what's funny is there was, because when George sold the company, he sold it with notes about what to do with the sequel trilogy. So there was notes there, but of course, Bob Iger comes in and goes, hey, George, how are you doing? Here, sign this. All right, thank you very much. And then, of course, what does he do? He looks at it and goes, midi-chlorians. Throw this garbage out. Bacteria of the Force. What are we going to do with that? No, we're not doing that. Of course, he does that. And look at it. They go, we'll just wing it. Let's get this JJ character in there. Lens flare of the Force. Come on, JJ. And look, JJ came in. He was almost like a director for hire for the first film. Comes in, smashes out a perfectly good clone of A New Hope. Beautiful film. Actually, quite a beautiful film. And then, of course, here's the only drama. I don't have an issue with Rian Johnson as a director, or even, what he was going to try and do. The problem was both films were in production at exactly the same time. You need to be able to see a finished product of one before you can take on to the second. That was the biggest. I honestly think that's where the problem started.
Yes, and whereas with Rogue One, they'd got boundaries to that.
Yes.
I mean, people get cynical about prequels and the fact that it had to fit in such a small space, but they used that to a strength. Those boundaries actually helped their creative process and were able to help them set achievable goals for how they were going to tell that story, how they were going to roll it out. Whereas with, as you say, when they were putting the sequel trilogy together, putting them together over such a short period of time, which I suspect was because Disney needed to make back the money that they'd spent buying Lucasfilm as quickly as they could. There's nothing unreasonable. It's perfectly good business, that is. But in doing so and having both creative teams going at the same time and being unwilling to work with one another from allegedly. Colin Trevorrow, that's probably a discussion for another time, but, there is a degree of, there seems to be animosity between Colin Trevorrow and Rian Johnson, and I can completely see why. But the fact that, these two teams were pulling in different directions at the same time whilst working on the same property and on stories that were so interconnected, that was only ever going to result in some of the fabric of it being torn.
Mm-hmm. Oh, incredibly. And while we're quickly on Rian Johnson, I'm going to say Mr. James Cameron, unfortunately, that Rian Johnson made the best Terminator film, and it's called Looper. It is a brilliant film.
I like Looper.
It's a great film. Actually, the other movie that I love that Rian did was Brothers Bloom, which is actually a really, really nice film. So you got to get those out of the way. But I will say this. The biggest thing is Solo now even looks a far better film for me than the mess of the Skywalker. It's just all over the place. That film, I love so much of it, but it's crammed together. You could tell there was so much they needed to tell. And again, it's because there was no plan, no grand plan. But here's another breakdown that's happened recently, folks, and I'm going to say it due to the Clone Wars. And now, I will caveat with this, I have not watched all of the new Clone Wars season yet. I've watched part of, so I don't know a lot of the spoilers. But It has been broken down not only through our pals on Facebook, we've seen some of them talk about it, but the story group have been called out on this, unfortunately, through the Ahsoka Tano story. So there was a novel that went out a little while ago, and a few other elements. They have been basically retconned by the Clone Wars TV show now, which has called them out in the fact that the story group's main job, so they only had one job. This story group had one job, and their job was simply to keep the continuity together. Now, obviously, I personally think, first of all, I'm going to say they do a fantastic job. They do. They really do. It's a hard job. This is not an easy job to do. But books and comics and graphic novels, games will always, no matter what, whether it's a filmmaker, TV director, producer, whatever, it always will take second place to what's on screen. That's just a given. Same with Doctor Who, Star Trek, Stargate, right?
Yeah.
So they went in with, I honestly think, a very honest and, it's a hard job to be able to get all the creatives together on the same plan of trying to keep a continuous story. And
that's a fair judgment, yeah.
it's a bloody hard job. So my hat's off to them because I love them. They've done a bloody hard job. But with this, obviously, this now, little things like that coming, whether it's being rewritten, vice versa, or they just have to come out straight up and say, well, unfortunately, yes, now some of this material is what they call legends, or basically expanded universe, which is not canon, right? So yeah, it's literally they're at that point. So to me, you have to come out and say that there's literally, unfortunately, the story group are going to be now, sectioning off parts of those expanded stories as what they are. They're expanded stories which may or may not be canon anymore.
It's what they call plausible deniability.
And in the end of the day, I will say there's a massive Star Wars film coming in December, folks. And if, at the end of the day, this is the film which will hopefully, when the creatives have watched this movie, of course, we're talking about the one that influenced Star Wars, the one, the only Dune. We're talking about, of course, by Denis Villeneuve. Hopefully, this will be such a kickstart. I really feel that this is going to be the Mad Max Fury Road for sci-fi. This is going to be such a game changer that will re-energize the creatives there. It's because Star Wars is perfectly the rock and roll version of Dune. That's how I've always seen it. Hopefully, they'll watch that and go, oh, wow, okay, we need to up our game. Because, folks, I hate to say it, Star Wars, you do need to up your game.
That's a really, really good point, I don't think anybody, any Star Wars fan out there who's maybe folding their arms a little bit and thinking, you should look at it at this. There are no new Star Wars films coming in the immediate future, and I think that the success of Dune. Don't get me wrong. If this is a bad film, then it won't deserve to succeed. Let's hope though that it is a good film, because it will, if it succeeds creatively and with audiences. If it succeeds on all those levels, it can only be good for this genre generally, and it will encourage Disney and Lucasfilm and everybody else to double down on efforts to take a fresh look at Star Wars and start to craft some really good films, really robust stories, memorable characters, and take the Star Wars fictional universe through into the future now, into a next phase.
100% agree. And here's another thing too. We've obviously had human characters, both male and female, be the leads of these films for so long, and recently, obviously, we've got a lot of we got Rey, we've had as a great lead. I think Daisy really done such a fantastic job in the role, and we've also had obviously Adam Driver, and we've had Han Solo as both a youngster and an older. We've had all these great Luke Skywalker. Obviously Leia as well, and obviously in Rogue One as well. We got such a great cast, but now is the time for them to do something completely different, and particularly with characters like Ahsoka Tano and alien characters. I want to see this really go forward. I want to see us push forward. Star Wars is an alien universe, it's multicultural. Now let's see droids, aliens, different beings altogether take the forefront. Why can't they? It should be able to do that.
I think you're absolutely right, and in a sense, it's difficult to understand why it has taken so long. I mean, maybe Ahsoka, you could say that she's probably the true lead of the Clone Wars, but in live action, I think it is past time now. It is a strength of the Star Wars universe, both in the way that they tell their stories and the fact that they've got more money than everybody else to do it properly on any budget, really, on a TV budget, on a movie budget. And to, I think with the Star Wars universe, we are used to seeing strange, classical sort of sci-fi characters and tropes from all the way, stretching right the way back to the 50s, sort of reimagined and in all sorts of primary colours. And this is the beauty you see in what George Lucas, when he sort of visualised this universe with the concept artist whose name I'm forgetting now.
Ralph McQuarrie.
With Ralph McQuarrie. When they got together, I've even met Ralph McQuarrie. That's shameful, I forgot his name. Yeah, but in sort of imagining all this was always a key component of it. Now is the time. Now is the time to grab that by the scruff of the neck before Star Trek does it. Because they've got a great character on Discovery, haven't they? That's played by Doug Jones, Saru. And in a sense, he's pretty much the beating heart of that show. He's the closest, I believe, they've got to a proper spiritual lead that people like. And I think Star Wars could do that. I think you could argue they've done it with the Mandalorian because we never see his face, but. We know that he's a humanoid, so it's a little bit of a cheat. I think they could do this with Star Wars. They could even do it in the movies and make us believe, make us relate to a character like that, and do it a damn sight better than James Cameron.
I'm sure we could definitely do it. The thing is, do we really need another Avatar, let alone 4 avatars, which is what you're getting, folks? You're getting 3 more, right? You're getting 3 more plus a prequel. That's what I hear.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't need another one. But maybe we are in the minority. Maybe there are people out there, Adam, I don't know. But I'm yet to meet any. Most people don't really. I think a great deal of people out there in the general public have forgotten all about Avatar and
Pocahontas with 6-foot Smurfs.
Yeah. I don't want to knock success because it was very popular at the time, but it was a long time ago now. Talking 12 years. Come on.
Well, come on, and considering Avatar is not really what we talk we will talk about here, folks. But I will say this about Avatar, right? So one of the key things about that show was that you had a mortality to it, or that film, right? Obviously, Steve Lang's character, Miles Quaritch, the Colonel, dies at the end, and we also lost Sigourney Weaver in it, right? Guess what? They're in every single next sequel. They're in it.
Yeah, well, yeah. So how can you care? How can you really invest in a universe that they're only one film in, and that they're already blurring their own lines, changing their own story? It'll take a lot for people to invest in
clones. Clones. It's got to be clones.
I suppose it has, yeah. But the fact that I haven't given it a moment's thought, that I just fair enough. I don't know. Maybe people who grew up, because we were old men by the time that came out, weren't we? Well, I certainly was. Maybe there are kids, people who were kids when Avatar came out who feel differently and are really sort of stimulated by it and can't wait and are speculating about what that could be in the same way we did about the Star Wars sequels. Maybe there are people out there like that. If you're listening to this, get in touch with Adam. I'm sure he'll be happy to hear from you. But I doubt it. I think they're probably few and far between.
The big thing is, at the end of the day, we've got a time where I think Star Wars needs to have a bit of a reset, a bit of a kickback, and maybe even look at what went right, what went wrong.
Oh, well, Adam, we all need that from time to time. I know I certainly do.
That's the biggest thing. I think, even the Doctor Who universe, which obviously you're an expert on, needs a bit of a Chibnall re-switch. Chibnall.
It does.
And I think that's the thing is that sometimes you need to, look at it as a business sense. If we've got this body of Lucasfilm, we've got customers, which are us, the fans, and it's such a massive demographic. It's not just us old people, and it's from one end of the spectrum to the other. But I think we all forget what these films are about. It's for kids. These films are meant for a younger generation, not for us.
At the heart, yeah, they are. Yeah, I think they are.
And not to push agendas. Like this is a series of films that are there as fairy tale. It is all meant to be fairy tale.
That's certainly how I've always viewed the Star Wars universe. Yeah, very, very, very much so. And this puts the people who are making it, you see, this puts them in a position of immense responsibility that comes with a duty of care to the audience. You know, not just the children watching, but to the family audience. People who go multiple generations will go to the cinema. You know, in normal times, not in the present times that we're living in as we record this, but usually we will go, you know, you could even get 3 generations of the same family going to see a Star Wars film together. And so you have a duty of care to look after all those interests and to provide something for all of those people, and to not make the film for yourself. If you can help people see the Star Wars universe through your eyes. You know, if you've got some sites you want to show people how you see things, but the story should be wide open. It should be told for everybody from all different perspectives, and have George Lucas's magic, a sprinkling of magic, and George Lucas's voice in there somewhere.
Yeah, I think there's sort of, as a whole, the only part that's really ringing true for the George Lucas is Clone Wars and Rebels to a certain extent, because Dave Filoni's involvement in that, and there's definitely that through line there.
Yeah.
I think the films have lost touch with that to a certain extent, and
a little, yeah.
Yeah, they really have. George was about accessibility, but also about telling a ripping yarn. I mean, Star Wars is such a great, strong story, and I think the big thing is that really always is a bit of a nightmare for me is to think that George is looking back, maybe having a watch of these films after they've been released and going, "What's happened to my baby?"
Fantha Tracks. Voodoo!
And the people who've made them haven't done this. They haven't done that deliberately. I mean, there's certain quotes that we know about that. They wanted to subvert expectations and all that sort of thing. But and some of that, it's reprehensible. Some of the things that have been said. But generally, when they were actually making the film, they weren't trying to disrespect George Lucas. They weren't trying to upset anybody. Somewhere underneath it all, hearts were in the right places. But it's sort of, how can I put this? When somebody in the equation, when nobody is around to tell them no, there should always be somebody, and everybody in this who's able to tap them on the shoulder and say, "No, you're being an arse."
And the biggest thing at the end of the day is come December, Villeneuve, who is never had a bad film. I mean, he really has. Let's look at Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner, bloody 2049 for crying out loud. Each film. Now, not all of them made a lot of money. Let's face it, Blade Runner 2049 wasn't exactly a success at the box office. But hold that film up, and there's no filmmaker that can make that vision. Not even Ridley Scott, who created Blade Runner back in 1982, could hit the vision that this guy does. He gets it. He just nails it. And his own words were,
he's the right man. He's the right man at the right time to take on something like Dune.
Dune is literally going to be what people have been screaming for from this sequel trilogy, which is adult Star Wars. You're going to get it, folks. This is the bad boy. This is the big kahuna. This is the film that will spice flow all over the place. And the thing is, you've got a TV show that's coming out, and, I hate to say it, I do know some people are on track, so even said they're a bit worried about how this comes out. When it does, it may rule the roost.
Well, this is it. We need shows to be that bold. We need shows that are willing to try to step up and to make a claim to that kind of stage. I think we've got certain shows kicking around at the moment that were capable of doing that, but are always sort of teetering on the edge of cancellation. And so they kind of, things like The Expanse and
Yes.
The Orville, which are great shows with dedicated creatives behind them who have got vision, but they're never given enough security from one season to the next to know that they're going they're going to be backed up by the money men. Nobody's got a bottomless purse, we know that. But it's as if they're always being on the back foot, and they literally don't know if every 5 or 6 episodes is going to be their last one.
That's right.
Whereas with June, I think they can invest time in it. They can back it up with the movies, and give it time to grow. Give the audience and the fan base a time to live in the world and familiarise themselves with the lore. Because the denser lore is, the harder it is to roll out, and to be going at it from a couple of different corners like this, it's all. I mean, obviously they want to create something that's going to make money. the fact that they are doing this in such a considered way means they care about the story, and they care about giving the audience as full an experience of it as they can. Okay, you're not going to win everybody with that. You can't please everybody all of the time, but they're giving this the best stab they possibly can. And this blueprint could easily be applied to Star Wars again. And you think, oh, that's ridiculous, Dan. Star Wars has been around for 40 odd years. Everybody knows what Star Wars is, and that's partly true. But it's unavoidable that the Star Wars water's been a little bit muddied over the last 4 or 5 years, mainly by Disney and by mismanagement and a couple of bad decisions.
Yeah, definitely. And again, hindsight's a lovely thing, but I think again, stepping back, looking at from looking for the hourglass and seeing what it is the way to look for it too. So, but folks, before Dan goes, we've got to plug the show. That is, of course, Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast on the Fandom Podcast Network. Where can we find that?
Yeah, well, it's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, about 14 years before Star Wars appeared. There's this little TV show called Doctor Who on the BBC, a wonderful little television programme.
The TV show that could.
Yeah, starring William Hart, not the first Doctor, forever the first Doctor. Now, also one of the big three. Up until very, very recently, it was absolutely brilliant with very few bad episodes. It's not going through a great time at the moment, but Doctor Who itself is about more than the TV show. It is about the merchandise. It's about the expanded universe on audio and in print, and it is about the fan base, just the same way that Star Wars is, and the way that we celebrate it in our day-to-day lives, the way that we incorporate it into our lives, the way we have fun with it and celebrate it together. And that's what my Doctor Who podcast on the Fandom Podcast Network is all about. That's the spirit of it. It's called Type 40. You can find it on the Fandom Podcast Network's master feed. It's also on Apple Music, is it called now? Apple Podcast, sorry. It's on Stitcher, Google Play, Podbean, iHeartRadio, all over the place. New episodes drop most weeks. I'm afraid to say I'm on all of them. Sorry about that. But I do rope in all sorts of other people from all over the world, including Adam. He's been on a few times.
And
people
Cole
from
Wagner.
America, people from Australia, people from Ireland, people from Scotland, people from all over the place, and every decade of Doctor Who history. Got lots of surprises coming up over the next 2 or 3 months, including people actually from the TV show. For the first time, a few interviews have already been recorded, so I can confidently say that now, and know I can deliver. So, yeah, look for Type 40 on the Fandom Podcast
And
Network.
Tom Baker will have
Doctor
some
Who.
jelly beans. Can I have some jelly beans, Tom Baker?
I can guarantee the jelly babies have to bring your own, but I can guarantee that if you like Doctor Who and if you've been following it for longer than 5 minutes, you'll find plenty to enjoy on Type 40.
Well, of course, we like to see Sean get the polish and take it for a spin.
In an ideal world, Sean would have already been in it.
Sean would take it to St. Andrews.
Yeah, we can only dream.
Of course. Big thanks to Dan for coming on the show. And Dan,
thanks for inviting me.
May the Force be with you. Next up here on the Fantha From Down Under is a flashback to a show we did with, of course, Erik, Onkenhout, a dear pal of the show, and of course, one gentleman that knows his Star Wars books. You're listening to the Fantha From Down Under. Where can I find the Fantha From Down Under? Here's where you can find the Fantha From Down Under. You can find it at fanthatracks.com, along with all the other great Fantha Tracks radio podcasts and, of course, all your Star Wars news up to the minute. looking at articles from all over the Star Wars fandom, also videos, looking at obviously collecting, you name it, it's all there by the amazing group that we have, a huge group, and it's worldwide, folks. It's all the way from one end of the globe to the other, all celebrating Star Wars, so go and check it out. You can check out me, the host, at The Lethal Mullet. That's the handle, at The Lethal Mullet, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'm also over at FPN, the Fandom Podcast Network, where you can find me with the Lethal Mullet Podcast, looking at action cinema and more. And right now we're looking at James Bond. So in some ways, it's very much reminiscent of the great franchises of action and, of course, adventure, which, of course, had a hand in influencing Star Wars. Also, we have over there, along with fellow Fantha tracker Mark Newbold, we have Making Treks, a Star Trek fan podcast looking at a deep dive into the Star Trek galaxy. All there. And, of course, fpnet.podbean.com. But make sure you check into www.fanthatracks.com for all your Star Wars news in a single file.
Yeah, if you buy a Blu-ray for $34.99 and you watch the movie and you maybe watch the features and maybe like a day or two of enjoyment, and then but a book is like weeks, if you take it nice and slow, and get more for your money.
You really do. You get far more. I think you get depth of characters. I think that's the great thing about the new thing they've done since, whatever it was, 2012, 2013, when they sort of restarted the storyline. They gave us that, didn't they? They gave us sort of like an interplexing storyline which, included all of that supplementary material.
Are you talking about when they redid the canon, or?
Yeah. So, I think the one thing that it did do, it brought everything together tighter, if anything, with the canon. I think, the previous expanded universe was one that was not as guided, I would say. A lot of people say that, there was so much going on from, different artists, different, obviously, writers and different creators that, there's no one way to sort of bring it all together.
No, I mean, it was all over the place. I mean, they would have to go back and, retcon things left and right. It was kind of like... for me, I would just kind of try to overlook it and be like, oh, whatever, it's just how it goes. But I try to make these feeble attempts to try to keep things straight, but I'm just like, it's just too much going on.
It's huge. It really is. And tonight, folks, we are going to be delving into some of that universe, the expanded universe, in particular, some of the Dark Horse work, which... I think at the time we had, the Zahn books, we had Anderson's books and Stackpole, and, I suppose that first sort of rung of post-Jedi books. But some of the ones that I really enjoyed were Tom Veitch's work. Obviously, we're going to talk about tonight is Tales of the Jedi, which visually striking. I actually love the ship that they've got in this, which is basically a Jedi ship that they use, and it's the most beastie, but the most also, just like the Millennium Falcon, it looks unwieldy, which I think is what makes it Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I looked at those comics, but I do want to reread those soon when I kind of I just want to go back and revisit some Legend stuff, but I just remember that series being so different from the Star Wars that I knew from the movies. Just the designs, the ships and everything, which made sense because it was 4,000 years before A New Hope. So
it's literally, this is literally 4,000 years before the birth of Luke Skywalker, with centering around the Keldroma family, and of course the Jedi. He's a Padawan to a Master Archer. His name is Ulick Keldroma. Ulick's an interesting character because he literally goes all the way through. So, and he also has a very Luke-like arc, except he does fall to the dark side, does become a Sith Lord. And, like Luke, loses his Force powers.
Yeah, he's actually a lot like Anakin, if the way you described it.
Actually, probably more so. It's like an amalgamation of all those characters. And he loses members of his family through his rage and stuff like that, and that's part of what brings him back, and of course we've also got Naomi Sunrider, which is one of the greatest Jedi from the old days.
She's awesome. Doesn't Ulick kill his own brother?
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was Kay Keldroma, if I remember right. Yeah, but these were a great series. I probably had this as the second or third trade paperback I picked up, and this came out in 1994. So I think I picked it up in about 97 out here in Australia. We always got comics 2 to 3 years after the US. And written by Tom Veitch. The art, I always thought was brilliant, is done by Chris Gossett and Mike Barrow for Chapter 1, and Janine Johnston and David Roach for Chapter 2. So they're just really, really interesting at the time where obviously Star Wars was coming back. We heard on the pipeline the prequels were on the way. We had books coming out, and then Dark Horse got the license from Marvel and really just ran with it, didn't it?
Yeah. I remember, actually, not that long ago, I was Googling Chris Gossett, because I don't remember him working on anything Star Wars after that. Mm-hmm. But I always liked his art so much, and I kind of wanted to see what he was doing nowadays, but I really couldn't find much. But, I just remember that art just being so distinctive, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot of, obviously, it's, the line work, particularly, that he did was... it looks very Marvel, but at the same time, the detail that's there is far more than Marvel ever did in theirs as well. He's worked with buildings and machinery. He gets that Star Wars style, and particularly with the Jedi ship that we see in it as well. The great thing about that is that it does have this sense of Conan the Barbarian meets Lord of the Rings meets Star Wars.
Yeah. I always describe his art as being kind of like sketchy, you know, and it's kind of raw looking. I always kind of like that kind of art because it's just like it doesn't look perfect, but it looks like it just looks good.
And it suits that period, which is I suppose against anything. It's the prehistory of Star Wars, so in some ways it's good to have it a little bit more. Hatch-like, there's a lot of hatching, cross work and stuff like that in the line work, and it's just perfect. Yeah. The design of the characters too is interesting. There's the actual Jedi look a little bit more military in this.
Yeah. Actually, now that you mention it, it kind of reminds me of. Well, I always kind of thought this, but I always thought the art in not just that Tales of the Jedi series, but like all the series that came after that. They all looked very, almost like Egyptian.
Yeah, actually, I can see that. There's kind of there's especially with Onderon and the Freedom Mad Uprising, which is another one. Which luckily I've actually got a signed version of that one, which is fantastic.
Oh wow!
So this one is called the Beast Wars of Onderon, which I think has a little bit of an influence from those Ralph McQuarrie paintings from. From Bespin, where you have the flying craft. The flying beasts. We saw some of that in Camino. Basically, the same sort of idea. But I think as early as 93, 94, when they were putting these together, this is what they were thinking of, because they have those guys flying around these, Arabian-looking cities and stuff like that. Onderon obviously takes a bit of an influence from that.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely the kind of like that Middle East kind of look, which would make sense because if that time is so far in the past and in real world, that time is also so like far in the past. So for me, that made sense. So it worked for me.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I like about it that there's sort of I don't know if it's an Aztec influence, possibly Aztec. But maybe Inca influence in South America in the way that the designs are for the Onderon soldiers and stuff like that too. There's definitely like even the blasters that they're carrying look like spears and lances.
Yeah, it all makes sense. I mean, all those ancient civilizations. I think they tapped into all of them. So
yeah, definitely. Now the ship design we're going to get to is this it's a unique design. It looks like it strays out from one big line, but also has kind of like this thing where it must transform a little bit to break into two wings. So it's it reminds me a little bit of the B-wing design.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's kind of got that variable sort of... Because as they come into land, it looks like those wings must split apart or something like that.
Yeah, it's very kind of like that swing wing, it comes in and out. Yeah.
It's a beastie looking thing. So you've got obviously Kay, and you've got obviously Erik. Both these brothers got a master by the name of Arkajeth, who's their Jedi master, and also have another Padawan with them, Donita, which is the Twi'lek that's with them as well.
I always thought those names are so unusual. I remember just like saying them to myself back then when I was reading them. I'm like, these names are so weird. and I had the audio books on cassette.
Oh wow!
And I remember listening to them like at work or at home, and I'm like, oh, these are so corny, but they're so good.
Oh, definitely. And I think the other thing too is, we looked straight to the lightsabers. There's quite a different design here going on. Obviously, it's much more broadsword-like. The Twi'lek is using what looks more like a Dooku-like saber. It's got a curved handle to it.
Yeah.
It has a guard on it too, by the look of it.
I have to I got to pull up some images. It's been so long since I saw these, but
it's amazing. Like obviously, they're versing the soldiers, and it looks like the royal family or whatever it is of Onderon. Now, of course, you could see that in the Clone Wars. I can't remember whether it was Season 3 or Season 4, but you do get to see a little bit of the canon version of that in those seasons when Anakin goes in there. But there's some great imagery a little bit later as they head into the jungles, and their battered cruiser basically is camouflaged in there. Now, these scenes, when I was reading them, Robotech was playing on... was it Channel 7 out here in the morning? So this is when I was in university. And I remember seeing the scenes of the Jedi cruiser landing in there and going, oh, this reminds me so much of Robotech, because in Robotech, in the third one, Invid Invasion, they used to always hide the jet fighters, whatever it is, the Veritech fighters, in the middle of the bush. So it's the same thing, trying to camouflage them so that they would not be seen by the bad guys.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
If I'm trying to remember the story right, is Exar Kun also in this series, or did he come later?
He's definitely in it, but he's in a later part of the series, which is called the Sith Wars. I think it was called the Sith War or the Sith Lords. But basically, Erik seeks him out and basically falls to the dark side. So he becomes the master to him. And, of course, that ties into later on where Jedi Search, or basically the Jedi trilogy, Jedi Academy trilogy by Kevin J. Anderson. Brings back the spirit of Exar Kun.
Yeah, because that book came out maybe a year after the comic started.
Mm-hmm.
I think Exar Kun was an apprentice to another Jedi, and he ended up killing his master. And then I don't remember exactly how they crossed paths, but I remember Ulik became his apprentice at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And he was known from back in the old days as the first guy with a double-bladed lightsaber, a blue one.
Yes. So when Darth Maul came around, it was I was like, oh wow, they're bringing it to canon.
Yeah, well, and that's pretty much it. It's they had that come out, and then I remember Kevin J. Anderson saying, "Yeah, well, I kind of done that."
Yeah.
So he got the ball rolling, and obviously George must have had a look at the EU and just gone, "Hey, that's a neat idea. Let's see if we can do that on screen."
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't new, even though it seemed new to some people, but no, actually, it's been around. But
it has. But
it's cool stuff.
I've always thought of these as the right way to do the technology of this time as well. It looks old. Everything looks like it's actually properly old. It looks ancient, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's just everything looks like anything old. Even if you think about architecture in our world, it's much more intricate.
Yeah.
But just like in this comic, all the old lightsabers, the clothes, the ships, everything is much more like creative and artistic, you know. And nowadays everything's just so sleek and everything. But yeah, it definitely looks cooler.
It does. And the thing is that really ties into, obviously, you know, the drama of that, without going too much into the Beast Wars of Onderon, is set around then sort of, you know, bringing stability to the planet and to the royal family of Onderon.
Yeah.
So it's a great... I think at the end of the day, it really shows I suppose, his, you know, temptation with the dark side a little bit, because he does get that sort of rage. But this is... I liken it to his Phantom Menace. This is kind of like Ulick's time as a Padawan before he does fall.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's a good analogy.
It is. Which brings us to, of course, the saga of Nomi Sunrider. Now, Nomi Sunrider is such an interesting story, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she was, I think, one of the first female, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, female Jedi that was really, you know, just a major character.
I think so too. Yeah, she's a reluctant one too, because it's actually her husband that is the Jedi. So he's a Jedi watchman of the Stennis system, and he's, I suppose, you know, like an outer rim. I liken it more to like what they're doing with the High Republic. These Jedi are more like marshals. You know, they go out in settled places, you know, and negotiate and do all the stuff, I suppose, that you see George's Jedi doing, but. It's interesting because you get to see that they're actually literally on the frontier. You know, they're out there taming the places ready to bring people in. So that the Jedi Knights were kind of, I suppose, navigators of the new frontier.
Yeah, and you know what was cool about her too is her master. I forget his name, but he was like that four-legged animal that didn't speak, and she, like, was confused. She's like, I don't want to be a Jedi. And she's telling the Master, like, hey, I don't want to be a Jedi. Leave me alone. And the Master just wouldn't respond. And then finally she was put into the situation, I think, where she had, like, no choice but to pick up the sword.
That's right.
And, yeah. Because, I think that's right.
Because at the end of the day, it was, you know, the...
Master Thawne.
Master Thawne, that's it, yeah. And what's interesting about it is the way that it comes in. Obviously, her husband, you know, is caught in a scuffle in a bar or something like that, and he tries to, you know, do what he's got to do, but he's gunned down for whatever reason, and then he appears back to her as a Force spirit and says, you know, at the end of the day, pick up my saber and take up the fight. You have the Force as well.
Ah, all right, that rings a bell.
That's right. So, you know, she had, I suppose, you know, a latent ability with the Force. You know, like she picked it up probably later, like Luke and Leia did. You know, it's there, but you know, it wasn't paramount for her too. So obviously, part of what she's doing is, you know, then taking on the plight of the husband and you know, becoming obviously learning the Force, and she's going to a planet that's very much like Tatooine, isn't she?
Yeah. Is she? I don't remember.
Oh, well, she is. She goes to, so basically a planet to find Master Thawne, obviously. And, you know, it's her, well, it's more about her hero's journey. You know, she meets characters along the way and stuff like that. But there's huts in it too, which is what is great about this story is I'd like to see a canon version of this because we get to see the scoundrels sort of universe of Star Wars, which to me I don't think we get enough of. We got a lot of it in Clone Wars, and we certainly got a lot of it now in Mandalorian. But a live-action scoundrelly stuff, you know, that's real Star Wars. Yeah,
I remember the cover because I got the individual issues, but the cover of each one was so nice. I remember just staring at them. You know, the art was so good.
I'm looking at them right now. So I've got in the trade paperback. If you go to the back of it, you can actually see it. But there's one with, so for the Beast Wars one, you've got Ulick in a classic pose, a little bit like Qui-Gon, with about 12 lightsabers behind him lit up.
Yeah. So before you go on, so I remember reading somewhere that each one of those sabers was supposed to represent like a Jedi, like on the council or something.
Ah.
Because, like there was supposed to be like 12 Jedi that were on the council or something like that. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
I remember reading that a long time ago. I don't know if that's true or not, but...
Yeah, it's a beautiful painting. And then you've got Donita on basically a beast. So, and these are... Looks like it's Dave Dorman did these. The artist Dorman.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why they're so memorable, because I remember his work on those. So you got that, and then you've got... he's sort of taking out some of the guys on... looks like Onderon. Then the pictures for Naomi Sunrider, there's a great one where Dorman's done the husband already cut down and she's holding her baby and just about to pick up the lightsaber. Then there's a bounty hunter in chains in front of what looks like Gardula the Hutt, even though it's not Gardula. And then, of course, we have Master Thon and Naomi literally going to town with the saber as well. Now, what's interesting about the artwork for each one is that obviously you get your own interpretations of those from Dorman to those artists, but God, it looks good, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It's the colors, you know?
Yeah, it's very vivid, isn't it? Bright and vivid.
Yeah. Yep.
So, I mean, look, I think the one thing that this takes away from compared to, say, the Old Republic, which, you know, probably is a little bit later in the timeline, if that's, you know, in the same sort of era. But this looks the real history as far as design, because I always think that the Old Republic looks too advanced.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
And that brings to another end, of course, another episode of the Fantha From Down Under, brought to you by Fantha Tracks Radio. Big thanks to, of course, the guests we had on today. And, of course, go and check out the respective episodes that we've had of those in the amazing backlog of the Fantha From Down Under episodes now. And lots more to come. We've got Adam Bray on the next couple of weeks, and we also have Chris Marked as well. It's going to be a fantastic couple of episodes coming up on Fantha From Down Under. And of course, you'll find that at fanthatracks.com, folks. I'm Adam O'Brien. We'll catch you next time.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Making Tracks.